Hey, hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of At the Table. You are in for a treat today. I have such a sweet sister recording with me, and I can't wait for you to hear from her and for her to share your story. And goodness, I've learned so much from you, Selma. And so, Selma Wilson, welcome to At the Table. I am so glad that you're with me today.
Jackie, it's such a joy to be with you. And I love At the Table. I could just see it sitting together, a cup of coffee with a group of women. It's just my joy. And so it's an honor to be with you today in this beautiful fall weather that we're experiencing. And my joy.
Okay. Are you in Tennessee?
I'm in Tennessee now. I got back and forth from Florida.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got a little bit of the fall temperatures right now happening, I hope. Okay. Today is the first day I'm in long sleeves because in Arkansas, you never know.
Yes, that's true. Across the country, it's very different. I left really hot weather in South Florida, to come here, but the leaves are changing and it's beautiful. I love all the seasons. I love that. Just like the seasons of our life. Yeah. You're in a season. I'm in a season. I'm that 66-year-old woman who's traveled longer than you with 5 grandchildren. And I love the seasons of our life and the seasons of just God's creation. It's beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. Agreed. I know. And Tennessee is so pretty, I think, in the fall. So definitely getting to take in some of the pretty color changing. And I agree. There's so much that happens, I think, in the change of seasons that we can relate to in our own life and story. And I am so pumped to get to learn from you today, to get to share a little bit of your story and just all that God has done and is still doing in you and your gifts. And so why don't we start out with just kind of, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in the church? Just some of those kind of get to know yous. And then we're going to start tracking into how you got to be the leader that you are today.
I love that, Jackie. Being 66, I got a long story. So no, let me just tell you, your history is a part of your destiny. And it's so important to go back to your roots. And God, I was so blessed. I was raised on a farm. My father was a farmer. With four brothers. That's important in my own development. And I'm so grateful for my journey. I had lots of space, just space in my life. But I grew up in a rural Southern Baptist church that was an anchor for me in so many ways. And looking back, but a couple of things I would say, I had the blessing of growing up in a home that my mom and dad really loved Jesus. And the grace of Christ permeated our home. And as an older woman, I see that more clearly. Of course, we had rules, but the grace and the joy and the love of Christ was my life, my background. And my parents loved the church. They love the church. I say this as a side note to every parent out there. Your love for Christ is the most important thing that you will do to disciple your children. Is it real? Is it authentic? Is the joy of the Lord permeating your life and your home? So that anchored me. My parents, many stories of them with the Bible open but it was done in the background of joy, not the law. And my mother she was not in the church as a child. So her family had a very weird religion and they didn't go to church. And so she was not able to go to church until she married my father, which is a whole nother story. But so her love for the church, she prayed for a husband that they could go to church and raise their children in the church. So that love for the church is so in me, and the love for Christ. So I like to say I came to faith in Christ as a 9-year-old girl, and I just haven't gotten over it yet as a 66-year-old woman. And I think that's important. We have to go back to the beauty of the grace of God in our life, that He created us, He redeemed us in Christ, He's gifted us as women. And I know the end of the story. I mean, heaven is ours. So living with that confidence in who you are, with that joy and peace, no matter what season you're in and what you face. That's my story. Mm-hmm. So this little rural country church, I have to talk about that because being raised Southern Baptist, being a part of something bigger, I knew that as a young girl. And our high attendance Sunday, we had 120. Mm-hmm. It was a small church. But in that church, I grew. I took on leadership roles. I think I was 13 when I was leading a missions program for little children. I spoke, I gave my testimony. But I was using the resources of our convention. I would go to youth convention, mission trips, the materials that we produced. I was doing Youth Sunday. I can look back and see all of that. I had a big vision that we were a part of something really big, and it impacted me deeply. I was very blessed. So my story and everybody's story is different. Many listening weren't raised in a family of faith, and so their story's different. But God is weaving a tapestry of His goodness and His grace and His mercy in all of our lives. But some of my own leadership journey came out of that foundation that I had in my home and in my church. That just really anchored me for what I didn't even know was coming. An older gentleman who came to our church, I was 12 years old. He looked at me, and I'll never forget this. He put a blessing on me. He looked at me and he said, God has His hand on you. You are gifted by Him, and you will do amazing things for Him. I was 12, Jackie.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I think we need to be looking for people that we can call out their gifts and put a blessing on them. Our children, I love doing that in this season of my life with the younger generation, being intentional about looking at people and just saying, God has His hand on you. You are gifted by Him, and He's going to use you to do wonderful things. Now, as a 12-year-old girl, I did not have a clue what was coming.
You may have run the other way.
I may have said, no, thank you. I do not want to do that. But, by faith, I just received that and said, okay, let's go. I'm ready. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that because I do think that there's a whole teaching on putting a blessing on your children and putting a blessing on others, and that I think is so important. It's so biblical. It's so true. And I'm thankful for this older gentleman who did that in my life. Yeah. So a little bit of my story. The church that wrapped around you. I love that because I have a similar story too, to where my church was very small, but even just the formation and the leadership opportunities. And I think even some of the challenges that I've experienced in adulthood, I didn't have as a younger girl, because it was just like, this is what we do, and it's church and we serve together, and you can share what God is doing in your life. And I think even as you speak about your mom and the joy and graciousness, man, have you taken that and run with that and been a legacy of being able to be that person to so many. I know you have been that way to me. I do think it's such a, coming as one of those younger people that has sat on a phone call with you and you've been able to say, this is where I see God working. This is where I see your talents and your gifts aligning with what God has for you. And so many of us, I don't know if you felt, I'm sure, just the insecurity of like, what am I doing? And I can't do this. And so to have God use somebody like you and others in the church that know you to kind of push you along and say, yes, girl, you can do this. That's right. That's right. That's right.
We need those cheerleaders in the church.
We do.
And you're definitely that.
We need that, Jackie. We absolutely do. I just laugh and say, I'm still insecure. I mean, I'm doing things today that I laugh in my heart, because I love to say, I'm just a country girl. I mean, I grew up on a farm in this rural place. But that is where Ephesians 3 is just that passage. Paul's prayer to the church at Ephesus has just been an anchor in my life. I really believe that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly more than we can ask or imagine as he works in us, all for his glory and the glory of his church. Yeah. I just believe it. There's somewhere, sometimes I read scripture and I go, wow, but you just settle that it's true. It's true. And so as a young girl growing up, I knew the gospel was true. I knew that God's word was our anchor in our life. And I love the church and all its messiness today. But you and I, our stories, I look back on my church. We had good biblical teaching. We had good worship. But I was just able to thrive in that environment in a beautiful way. Men and women both around me that loved me, cheered me on. I do think as we fast forward, there needs to be an army of us and that just build up the body. There's an attack on the church today, and we need to come around and build up the body, encourage the body, cheer people on, hold them up if they need to be held up. But we need an army of that. Less critics.
Girl, that can
less
preach,
critics.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. And more of that undergirding and support. And I just had that. And I'm so grateful for that. But we can do it today in the home and in the church. And let's do it. Let's go for it. But that has my whole story is weaved with that. People that called out gifts in me, Jackie, when there's no way I can do this. And somebody said, oh, yes, you can. You can do that.
Yeah. And what a difference it makes.
Yes,
right?
Everything.
Goodness.
Yes,
well, let's
it really
fast forward a little bit because I know we're going to have to do another episode because there's just so much to share. But in this first one, I know, because there's so many things. Well, first of all, where are you in the number of 4? So you have 4 brothers.
Yes.
So what number?
I am number 4. I have a baby brother and 3 older brothers.
Okay. And I know that was a question. That's interesting.
Well, I did have a leader that I worked with once, and it was, and I do think our stories are part of God's shaping in our life, who made this comment to me. He was a strong leader, real brisk. And he looked at me. I was 30 something. He said, "You're not afraid of me, are you?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm not." And then he said to me, "I bet you grew up with brothers." And it really helped me understand why I've been very comfortable with men all my life, very comfortable. And I think a part of it is that rule, a lot of brothers, and I was just in the mix as the only girl, and I was just comfortable with it. Yeah, this is what we know. So anyway,
Well, that leads us into fast forwarding to you serving on Lifeway and Dr. Rayner bringing you on as the first VP female leader in his executive team. So let's talk a little bit about what was that like? I know you had been with Lifeway and B&H for a little bit, so kind of working your way up, but just watching God open those doors for you and you being invited to the table as the first woman on that executive team. Tell me a little bit about that experience and what that was like.
Oh, wow, Jackie. Oh man. A lot of my story that I share, it's God's story. And I'll never forget, it was in July when Dr. Rayner called me to his office and told me that he wanted me to be the president of Brahman and Holman Publishing and wanted me to sit on his executive team. And Jackie, I laughed. I mean, I so respected him, and I laughed and I said, "That's not going to happen." I said, I thank you, Dr. Rayner, and and he basically said, "Yes, it is," and I need you to go home and talk to your husband. And that moment in time, I need to say, I never set out to be the first woman at an executive table at Lifeway. First woman in Lifeway's history to sit at the executive table. That wasn't even in my mind, my radar. I love Lifeway, had been serving there for many years, but again, it's an example. Dr. Rayner said to me, when I first met you, he had been at Lifeway, I think about 2 or 3 years before he had that conversation with me. I think 2 years. Mm-hmm. And he said, from the minute I met you, I knew I wanted you on my executive team. He saw something in me that, I never, I didn't see in myself. And I was terrified, afraid, but anyway, he led that journey, and I can't tell you, it was the hand of God. Absolutely. You talk about being insecure and, all those things that you think, I can't do this. But when the trustees voted on me, it was, and you have to remember that, here's the first woman on the executive table, and there were, I think, 40 plus trustees in the room, and I got a standing ovation. Wow. A standing ovation. And it was so humbling to me, the confidence that Dr. Rayner had in me, my executive leaders around me. How can you not? It's like, okay, okay, I'm gonna step into this. So that was the journey up to that, which I really didn't think I would be voted in. Can I just be honest here? Yeah. I told Dr. Rayner, I'm okay with that. You need to know, I'm okay if anybody has a problem with this. It wasn't like I'll continue to serve. And, but it was 8 years with him at the table. And you talk about growing and learning, and
I'm sure
it was, but it was to this day, I look back, I have been so blessed in my journey to have men like Dr. Rayner who believed in me, called out gifts in me, pushed me to do more than I thought I could ever do. And so once you go back to the back room, ladies, and you go, what have I done? Then you have to step out and you have to lead. So you get over it, and then you go, where am I?
Yeah. But, and there's so much that you're explaining that I think even feels similar in my seat. And Dr. Rayner wanting to bring on this initiative for women in church answers. And so the entire reason we have this podcast and resources coming out and, CAU, all of these things are because he has this vision. It's not just men in the kingdom, and it's not just men in the mission. And so I think there's just so much to where I'm smiling and shaking my head of like, yeah, I feel that. Yeah, I feel, yes. Okay. I've switched seats with you, I think.
And I love it, Jackie. I love it. That generations coming behind it. Dr. Rayner does. You're very blessed to be working with him. He's a visionary entrepreneurial leader, but he will be your biggest cheerleader, your biggest support. And I have so many stories about that, he gently but firmly called me to lead, because I remember in those early days, I'd go to the table and there were strong leaders around us. Oh my goodness. There was, Dr. Rayner loves strong leaders. And so here's this table of, I'm the woman and all these strong men. And I'll never forget, after one meeting, he called me to his office and very gently said, I need you speaking up more. I need you. Because I'm just like trying to find my way in this male world. But after he told me that, I spoke up every time. All right,
I have the green light.
I'm going. I'm not going to hold back. And anyway, but he I remember in my leadership role, one thing that really stands out, we had this crisis that hit the media. It was in B&H. I'm the president of B&H. And it was every news outlet in the country was calling from a Friday to over the weekend. And I'm in the fire. I am in the fire. I'll never forget Dr. Rayner. He didn't abandon me in the fire. He supported me in the fire. He coached me in the fire. He helped me make decisions in the fire. But I had to be the one. I had to be the voice in the fire. But I'll never forget his support. I'll never forget his confident leadership that was undergirding me while I was in the middle of something I'd never been in before. I'm not used to have Washington Post and New York Times calling me on issues, reporters sticking a mic under me. But that was such a beautiful story of leadership, that even as we lead and we call others to lead, there's a place for those of us that surround others, that we hold up. We're a safety net. We don't abandon in a crisis. We step up in a crisis. And he did that. But that's probably the biggest fire I was in.
Yeah. Well, and I think even your ability to, because I think, especially for young leaders, I think I can speak for, to where we hit crisis and we just react. And so I think even the wisdom that you're kind of sharing in this story of how you went to someone that did know what to do and took in that wisdom and that leadership and how to, and how much I always say it, we are better together. Like it is always better to be able to lean into one another, to gain that wisdom and perspective, and then go out stronger, because you're not just operating on your own. And so I could see it having flipped on another side to where, all right, you're the first, female president and you're going to show everyone. And so I love just the humility and the teachability, even in the stress, to be able to make sure that you were moving forward in wisdom.
That is so important. I think one of the things that as women that help. So I've had this asked a lot, how do you deal with men at that leadership table? And I've taught on that. I've done classes on that. But one of the things that really helps is it's not about you. If somewhere it's about the mission. So you get clarity on your purpose and mission, then you can lean in. Then it's not about you winning or you losing or you being right or you being wrong. It's not about you. So somehow, yes, you're a woman and you don't have to compromise being a woman. You don't have to be a man. Bring all your gifts to the table, because that's what's needed. But you can fight the fight for the mission. You can share your view when you're focused on the outcome. What are we trying to do here? Then you can get into the middle of that beautiful collaboration where everybody's got ideas. And I 100% believe we are better. God never meant us to do it alone. He never meant us to do it alone. And there's something beautiful that happens when you bring together that giftedness and you walk out of the room you're in a place you never dreamed you'd be. You've got an idea that formed that no one had until you came together to just really, and sometimes it can get very heated in that, the diversity opinions. But what helps you is, it's not about me. The goal here is not for me to win or for me to be better than everybody else at the table. It's really about whatever that goal and mission is that you're trying to accomplish. And then it's just delightful. It's fun. It's energizing. And, and I had so many experiences like that I'm so grateful for. But at the end of the day, I had to go back and lead an organization of over 100 people. And we had, budgets and all that stuff. And that's another point. You can get a lot of people's views, but then you have to make the call. You have to just say, where are we going? What are we going to do and not do? And get comfortable that not everyone is going to like your decision. You just have to get comfortable with that. You've prayed about it. You sought advice, and you have to make the call on what you think is right. And, so, woo.
Yeah. Okay. So this actually leads into a really good question that I think ever since it was one of our phone calls, I don't remember what we were talking about, but I remember you saying that you are an Enneagram 9, which is a peacemaker. And that struck me so much because I'm like, wow, like typically you hear like 1s and 8s, like I'm a 3, I'm the achiever. So, And so I thought that is so cool, because I think, and then that sent me on a journey to even find that like we've had several presidents that are Enneagram 9s,
Yes.
and like, and how God uses those personality types and those strengths to be able to collaborate and take very different views, obviously, and bring them together for the flourishing of others and the mission, and exactly like what you're saying. So
yes.
I want to know, I think, and we're totally on question 2. So like I said, there is going to be another follow-up podcast episode with you, but I want to know, because I agree. I think there is so much that you're saying in your experience, even with Dr. Rayner coming in and saying, hey, you're going to need to speak up, and you not taking that insecurely or personally, or, like kind of getting a chip on your shoulder because of that, and taking in the wisdom during crisis mode, but then knowing you've got to lead at some point, and that there is going to be a fallout, or there are going to be things that once you make that decision, it's not going to go perfect, like people are going to be upset with that. So I want to hear just from your perspective of how do you do that? And how have you seen God, I think, even use more how he has wired you, and how, so much of you, Selma, I think, is that confidence in the Lord and trusting that he is going to lead the way. And I know that's a big piece of it, but it still stings when the fallout happens or when you disappoint people. So maybe talk a little bit about how do you handle that, even after that hard decision, or after you're holding the tension of very gifted people, very gifted viewpoints? What do you do? What does that look like?
Wow. Well, I love the diversity of our personalities and our giftedness and our stories. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. There is nothing more beautiful. What my son-in-law and daughter just planted a church, and I've just spent a month in this church plant, and the beauty of the people around them, it is stunning, the diversity of gifts and story. It's in South Florida. You've got a lot of diversity.
Good Cuban food down there, by the way.
Oh, yes. Oh, great Cuban food. It's so beautiful. And what is so beautiful is they are uniting around what? Around the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it is profoundly beautiful. Come back to that. Our own personalities. See, I think, and we'll get to your question, but I just want, for all the personalities that are listening, the key to our personalities is absolutely the submission we have to the God who created us, where you get comfortable in your own skin. Because we're prone to look at other people and say, oh, I want to be like Jackie, or I want to be like Selma, or I want to be, no. Your giftedness, your story, everything about you is a beautiful tapestry that God has woven for you to make much of him, and for you to have the joy. He has a work for you to do. He has a beautiful, beautiful work for you that was established. I love Ephesians. That workmanship in us, and that work that we have to do, that is beautiful. So I want to say that. So let me tell you the truth, Jackie. If Selma had led her story, Selma would have always been behind the scenes. I'm the one that likes to be number 2, and I like to just encourage and build up, and, don't put me in the front in the fire. I don't want to be in the fire. Let some strong male that loves to fight be in the fire. I don't want to make the decisions about all those decisions you have to make in leadership, but God in his grace and mercy gave me everything I needed. And so there's a place where you just submit to him. I can't tell you, that's where your confidence comes. So I still am a person who, I love people. My last role at Lifeway, which I loved, was Chief People Officer.
I saw that.
I love that.
Cool.
It's culture and people. At that time we had about 5,000 employees, and I love people. I absolutely do love people. A side note, I don't think Jesus said it himself. Let me sum up all the law. Love God with everything you got, and love people. I think you have no equity to lead unless you love the people that God has given you to lead, not another group of people, not a different. And wherever you are as a woman, leadership is about influence, and you're influencing somebody. So your love for God is the thing that flows out of you. Ephesians 3, I mentioned earlier. Let us comprehend more the love of Christ and live in it
Mm-hmm.
So Selma's personality and leadership. I still to this day value the diversity of people that God puts with me. I'm consulting to nonprofit organizations. I love the people, both of them, very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I go in, and like I did when I was president, I listen to the people. I teach a lot that new leadership. You're responsible for mission and vision. I think number one, you've got to give a compelling vision for what you're doing. Because you're leading out of a purpose, you're not just doing activity.
Yeah,
so whatever you're doing in leadership, be able to articulate why you're doing it. What's your goal? And I personally believe make it a big one, because I think God's big. So I stood up in front of my B&H team when they had losses year over year. They were struggling in some ways. And I cast them a big vision. We're going to be number one in the market. We're going to grow year over year. We're going to launch a kids line. I just gave them a big vision. But then I spent 90 days, and I told them, I'm going to listen and learn from you. So I spent 90 days surveying, listening sessions, individual conversations, studying every backdrop about the business, and then I came out after 90 days with all the changes I was going to do. And those changes meant I cut out. There was parts of the work that we stopped doing which impacted people's lives. It was hard decisions. And but I think if you value people and love them, and you have a compelling reason for whatever you're going to have to step into that is not going to make everybody happy.
Right.
Then number one, you sought the Lord. It wasn't just I think about those early days in Brahman and Holman. This wasn't about Selma. It was about building an organization that would thrive and grow and impact more people with the gospel. So to this day, I don't like conflict, Jackie. I do love peacemaking, but you cannot live in a world today forever without there being conflict. And, I don't like it, but it's real, and you've got to get comfortable. And in fact, one of the biggest conflicts I had in starting women's resourcing at Lifeway, it was painful. There was, but one of the things the Lord gave me was the very people that were upset with me about us starting women's resources. God gave me, it was beautiful. I was in my 30s. I don't know what I'm doing, but we're starting to publish resources for women. And I had some forces coming against that because it was new. But what the Lord settled in me, it wasn't about me. They didn't, it appeared they didn't like me, but it really wasn't that.
Right.
It was the fear of change.
Right.
And even giving grace to people who might come against you, to ask the Lord to help you see them the way He does. And that helps you keep it in perspective. But yes, I do love people, and it's authentic. I do. God's given me that heart for people, and I love the diversity of people. When I say that, it's everything about it: stories and old people, young people, people that of many different colors and backgrounds. And I do think as women, it's important that we love the people that God has put in front of us. It just changes everything.
Yeah. I agree. And there's so much, that I think listening well and honoring the people that you're working with. But I think one of the things that I at least want to end with that I really love that you said is that you are gathering people around the mission of God, not the mission of Selma.
That's right.
And I know things were different, like as you were kind of starting off then, and now because of social media and the internet and all of those things, but it is such a temptation to have ministry be around you, and Instagram reels and your face and pictures and stage pictures with a book, and all of those kind of things. And I know none of those things are inherently evil, right?
No.
But I love that the why needs to be the gospel.
Yes,
the why is
right.
what God is doing. And so it's not about us. And I think even as a leader, having the mindset of, I am eventually going to be replaced,
That's right.
You're no longer leading at Lifeway. And so the trudge and the work and the paths that you were able to pave were good in that season. And now there are other gifted women and men that are kind of trudging behind you, know? And so I think one of the things that I am consistently thinking of are the college girls and the young 20s that are behind me, and how they are going to have a space and they are going to be able to lead in new ways that I'm not leading right now. And so I think just that challenge of maybe don't bend to the temptation of, the followers and the likes and trying to make us the platform, but instead bringing people together and rallying people together around the gospel and work that God is doing.
I think that's so important, Jackie. And it is so important. I think it's some of the challenges. I've lived long enough to see people that the people, that God will always be raising up a new generation. Let me say it that way. People come and go. It doesn't mean that whatever they did in their season didn't have huge impact, but there's somebody else that's going to come and carry the baton. I love scripture, and Moses died and Joshua. Yeah. It's just like the great Moses, he died and there was Joshua. Keeping that in perspective, God may give you a big platform. He may give you lots of influence, but the day is going to come when you need to hand it off. And it's beautiful because your mission is Him. I love Hebrews. We set our eyes on Christ and we run the race with our eyes set on Him. And when you do that all the days of your life, it's beautiful because He's the target for all of us. And building up the church. And we'll have to talk about that another time. But
that's the next podcast.
That's the next podcast because it's so important because we don't do it alone. We get to do it in the beauty of a community that together we love Jesus and all of our diversity. We're united around the cross of Jesus Christ and the redemption we have in Him. And so, Jack, every woman listening, and for you, I just want to come behind you, supporting you and say, be all that God has created you to be. Use whatever platform He has in the home, in the church, in your community. If He's given you more, step into it, and confidence in Him. That's where your confidence comes from. It comes from Him. He redeems all things for His glory. So even those times when you make the big mistake, He can use it and do something beautiful with it. So, girl, I'm excited about it. I love this. Come to the table. I love that. Let's break bread together. Let's fellowship together. It's one of the gifts that we have as daughters of the King of Kings. We get to do that. And it is beautiful and profound. And we need each other. Now more than ever. So
Amen. Okay. So I think we have like 5 next episodes coming out of this one conversation.
Well, I look forward to next time. I love you, girl. Yes. I look forward to next time. Okay.
And thank you so much just for all of that wisdom. And one, I think too, as somebody that is getting to kind of walk back from the path that you have paved for so many of us. Thank you. A huge thank you. And
my joy.
So you are a blessing. You are an encourager. You are a cheerleader and such a kindred spirit. I mean, I think literally we could talk for hours and days. And so thank you for sharing your time today at the table.
Thank you, Jackie. Blessings, girl.
And ladies, as you listen today, I hope that you have been challenged. I know you have been encouraged, and I hope that you are hearing the voice of God call you up into your homes, into your workplaces, into your communities, and to know that God has given you a personality. He's given you gifts. He's given you resources to go and leverage them for him. And so I hope you know that both Selma and I are cheering you on, and we can't wait to see you next time for another episode of At the Table. See you then.